I watched my mother-in-law tilt a glass to the light, her thumb hiding a tiny dropper between two gleaming rings. One clear bead fell into the sangria and vanished. When she saw me in the doorway, her smile arrived a half-second too late. "Special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law," Veronica cooed. I thanked her, palmed that glass, and set it down in front of the one person in the room who never missed a chance to belittle my work. Philip lifted his drink, smirked the way men smirk when they believe the world is a mirror, and took a long swallow. 40 minutes later, he was clutching the banister, gray and glassy-eyed, insisting his stomach was a little off, while Veronica followed him down the hall with a fluttering hand and a voice pitched low like a stage whisper. I sat at their walnut table with my water and my heartbeat, watching my wife watch her mother, and I knew two things at once. Veronica had tried to drug me, and she believed she would never be caught. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 34, a paramedic and field training officer in Charleston, South Carolina. I work 12-hour shifts that always turn into 14. I've cracked chests on kitchen floors and delivered babies in Ubers and sat on curbs with strangers while their worlds burned down, waiting for the fire trucks to make the lights look less blue. It's not glamorous, it is real. And to Veronica and Philip Huxley, real has never been enough. Lila, my wife, met me behind a farmer's market booth where I was volunteering at a community CPR table. She was buying tomatoes and left with my number written on the back of a pamphlet. Lila is a civil engineer who designs stormwater systems that keep neighborhoods from drowning when hurricanes remember our names. She is the most competent person in any room and the only one who can make me forget the worst calls by asking me what kind of bird was sitting on the stoplight at meeting in line. Her parents never forgave her for choosing me instead of the consulting partner Philip had already taken to out-of-town dinners while Lila was still finishing her master's. "Blue lights and blue collars," Philip liked to say when my schedule forced us to arrive late to Sunday suppers. "America runs on people like you, Ethan. We just don't want our daughter to." Veronica rarely spoke that plainly. Her judgments arrived wrapped in silk and charity. She ran a foundation that held galas with ice sculptures and silent auctions for trips to places where the poor could not afford to live. At church, she taught a marriage class she wasn't qualified to teach. At home, she treated courtesy like currency. My job, our jobs were, to her mind, inelegant. "You will burn out," she said. The week after Lila and I got engaged. "It's not a prediction, darling, it's a statistic." I learned early that there was a choreography to dinners at the Huxleys. If I mentioned the night shift's overtime budget, Philip's mouth would flatten and he'd ask if I'd considered supervisory roles with daylight and dignity. If Lila celebrated a culvert fix that saved a block of homes, Veronica would praise her and then add, "Imagine what you could do if you weren't so exhausted from, what is it called, field work." It was the sort of cruelty people applaud when it is called standards. The night Veronica reached for the dropper, I was 11 hours back from a 72-hour shift broken into pieces by rescues and a rollover on I-26 that put a minivan on the news. Lila had begged me to rally for her mother's birthday. "We can leave early," she promised, rubbing the space between my eyebrows with her thumb the way she does when I look like a headache. 2 hours, tops, I'll drive. I didn't see the dropper at first, only the line of glasses. Veronica set out with the precision of someone who believes accidents happen to other people. When I stepped into the butler's pantry, she turned, slid the tiny bottle behind a French cookbook, and held out a stemware glass with both hands like an offering. "For you," she said, "bright, too bright. Special recipe." The sangria had a shine like cellophane over a bowl. Most people wouldn't notice. Most people aren't trained to notice surfaces and the ways they betray bad news. I took 2 glasses, walked back to the table, set the doctored one in front of Philip, and felt something like shame and resolve cross the room together and shake hands. Philip finished his second glass before the dessert plates clinked. He laughed too loud at a story he would normally correct. Then he stood, blinked slowly, reached for the back of his chair as if the room had tilted, and failed to land his hand. By the time I came back from washing up, his pupils were slow and his words slid at the edges. He didn't vomit. He floated. Veronica claimed shellfish. We had eaten roast chicken. I poured my water over ice and kept the glass Veronica had given me. Lila squeezed my knee beneath the table, a tiny question. I covered her hand with mine, a tiny answer, not here. The next morning, after I slept 4 hours the way people sleep after driving through a storm, I called a friend from medic school who now worked at an independent toxicology lab. I told him I wanted a full panel on a trace sample from a glass. Personal? He asked, because he knows the shape of my voice when the job comes home with me. Family, I said. He did it as a favor and as a professional, which is to say he called me 3 days later and didn't try to put the surprise into his tone. Z drug, he said. Zolpidem, specifically. Concentrations low, like a quarter of a 10-milligram tablet dissolved, not lethal. Enough to make someone pliable and fuzzy around the edges if they aren't used to it. If they had a drink or took something else, you could get retrograde amnesia. Can you put that in a letter? Do you want me to put it in a binder? I want you to send me the truth. He sent the truth. I put it in a manila folder with a copy of an email Veronica had forwarded to Lila that week, an invitation to a couple's retreat at their church titled Building Trust Through Boundaries. I laughed without humor and then stopped laughing at all. There are two kinds of fear that live in the body. The immediate one that makes your hands shake when a car swerves into your lane, and the older one that tightens behind your ribs when you realize someone you love is not safe near the people who taught them what love is. That second fear is patient. It waits for an opening and then it bites. I didn't show Lila the report that night. She had her own storms to manage, a project downtown, a contractor who wouldn't answer emails, a councilman who wanted to turn a floodplain into a park with benches that would float away the first time the sky got mean. I can skip Sunday, she offered, reading the tired at the back of my eyes. Let's skip it, I said, and we watched a stupid show and ordered the kind of takeout you can only eat on the floor. Veronica called anyway. She left a voicemail full of gentleness and God. Lila, darling, you sound stressed. Why don't you take a little break from all the, what is the term, site visits? Let me book you a day at the spa. And Ethan, she added, the smile audible, I found an opening at Philip's firm that would be perfect for someone who enjoys helping people. Client relations, 9 to 5. Thought of you immediately. I texted my lad friend for a second copy of the letter and a notarized affidavit. Then I drove to the county records office and did what Veronica assumed I did not know how to do. I searched. The public index is merciless. It does not care about charity galas. Veronica had 3 active prescriptions for benzodiazepines from 3 different doctors, the kind of pattern most pharmacists will catch unless the patient insists on separate pharmacies. There were 2 petty civil suits settled quietly in the last decade involving alleged conversion of property at social functions. There was a trespass warning from a country club whose board Philip chaired. That night, Lila propped her feet on my lap and sorted paper for a meeting. I told her I loved her without moving my mouth. The next morning, I called Veronica and asked if I could come by to take headshots for the Foundation newsletter, free of charge. Her yes was quick, and it contained the thing all traps contain, certainty that you are the clever one. She wore white and pearls and a perfume that smelled like floral apology. We'll shoot by the bay window, she said, gesturing to a room staged for magazines. I set my camera bag on an ottoman and handed her the manila folder. Look at this first, I said. Her eyes flicked to the embossed lab letterhead, then to the pharmacy records I had highlighted, then to my face. This is a misunderstanding, she began, the way people begin when they intend to tell you they don't need to be understood. You lifted a dropper behind a cookbook, I said. This is not a misunderstanding. She put the papers down on the coffee table and smoothed them with both hands. Then something like relief passed over her features and hardened into something like resolve. You were unwell the night you arrived, she said, as if we were already agreeing. Exhausted. You shouldn't be making important family decisions when you are spent. I make life and death decisions in parking lots, I said, and I wash the blood off my boots with a garden hose when the sink is full. You tried to make me small. I tried to protect my daughter. The sentence came out cold and clean, from your chaos, from your unpredictable hours, from a future where everything depends on whether you speed safely between scenes and whether your knees last. She deserves a life built on something stable. You think because you work in emergencies, you understand urgency. You don't. Urgency is a 30-year mortgage. You put a sedative in a glass. You wanted me to miss something so you could call me unreliable. That's not protection, that's sabotage. It would have been a lesson, she said, a necessary one. My turn, I said. You're going to tell Philip what you did. You're going to leave me and Lila alone. You're going to stop inviting us to dinners where the menu is respect we're expected to eat on command. And you're going to do it because the alternative is showing this folder to your board and your pastor and the women you have been mentoring about boundaries. Her laugh was small and mean. You think anyone will believe you over me? I brought a camera, I said, but I also brought a calendar. This is what you've done for years. I know about the trespass warning at the club. I know about the jewelry you didn't borrow. I know about the prescriptions. If I have to, I will learn about your donors and your friends, and I will find the people you hurt because they did not dress their pain like yours. And if you ever touch a glass I'm holding again, we will not be talking about headshots. Her chin lifted. Get out of my house. I left with the folder and without the photographs. The next hour spun like bad weather. 15 minutes after I pulled into our driveway, Lila's phone rang. She stepped onto the porch to take it, then came back inside with her mouth in a line. What did you say to my mother? She asked, careful like we were walking on oil. She tried to drug me Sunday, I said. I told Lila everything I knew and the parts I suspected and the part of me that wanted to pretend I was wrong. I showed her the lab report with my friend's name she recognized from our wedding. I showed her the pharmacy records. I showed her the folder like a confession. My mother wouldn't, she began, and then she stopped the sentence before it broke us. I need to talk to her. Take this, I said, handing her copies. Go see them. Ask the questions you already know the answers to. I'll be here when you're done. She was gone 3 hours. When she came home, her eyes were red and her shoulders were square. My father says you're trying to divide the family, she said flatly. My mother says she mixed up glasses. They both say you've been unstable since the last bad call. They're not wrong about the last bad call, I said, but that's not this. She leaned her head against the pantry door and breathed. I want to believe you, she said. I do. 3 days later, a padded envelope arrived in our mailbox with no return address, only my name written in a neat teacher's hand. Inside was a thumb drive and a note that said, "You should see this." Sabrina. Sabrina is married to Lila's older brother, Logan. She and I have shared the gentle glances of people who got added to a family by marriage instead of blood and do not get to vote on bylaws. We are friendly, not close. I plugged the drive into my laptop and watched Veronica's kitchen appear in high resolution from an angle I recognized, the small camera tucked into the crown molding above the pantry door. I watched Veronica tip the dropper into the wine. I watched myself walk in and pick up 2 glasses. I watched Philip drink. There were 2 other clips. The first, time-stamped an hour after we left, showed Veronica slamming a cabinet and hissing, "You were supposed to hand him the glass." Philip, sweating, replied, "You said you had it under control." Veronica said, "It isn't the first time I've had to do something drastic to show Lila who she's chosen." The second clip, 2 days later, was in the study. Veronica, he's manipulative. Philip, he's stubborn. Veronica, we keep pressure on. She'll break. She always breaks. Remember, Thomas? Remember how we... The audio fuzzed under the weight of their own carelessness, then steadied. Found what we needed and put it where she could see it. I called Sabrina. She answered on the second ring and whispered, "I'm in the laundry room." "Why send it to me?" I asked. "Because they did it to me too," she said. "Not the drugging, the rest. When I was engaged to Logan, they told him I was after money. They told me my family wasn't our kind. Veronica found messages from an ex I hadn't spoken to in years. I thought I was going crazy until I wasn't. Logan won't hear it. He thinks his parents are stern. He doesn't know stern from sabotage. Will you tell Lila you sent this? No, she said softly. She needs to want the truth without permission. The drive felt like an object with weight in my pocket. I waited for Lila to come home and then I plugged it into the television and we watched her parents in their own words. She covered her mouth with her hands and stared at the carpet, and then she walked to the bathroom and threw up like the body understands betrayal before the mind can form a sentence. We didn't go to the Huxleys that Sunday. We invited Logan and Sabrina to our house for dinner. We fed them lasagna and then fed them the footage. Logan shouted. Sabrina cried. Lila sat very still and then not at all. When Logan accused me of editing, I handed him the thumb drive and told him to show it to his parents if he believed I had forged their faces. He didn't. He paced our living room and called the past by new names and left without hugging his wife. The next morning, Philip texted me, "Let's meet like men, no wives, his club at 6. Clubs like his have rooms for conversations that do not belong to the century. He poured me a scotch from a bottle whose price he intended me to recognize. He did not drink it. He smiled like a closing argument. Families are complicated, he began. Veronica is protective. If you've convinced Lila to be angry, you've made your point. Let's be adults. What do you want? I want you to leave us alone, I said. No more retreats, no more job listings, no more sudden invitations to dinners where the menu is compliance. You will not try to engineer my absence or Lila's doubt. He held up a hand like a judge. You married into a family with expectations. We take care of our own. We make sure our own make smart choices. This isn't about you. It's about stewardship. It's about control, I said. His smile thinned. Lila was engaged once before you, he said conversationally, the way people set a trap with a dessert spoon. A surgeon. Nice boy. We discovered he was not what he seemed. She was devastated, but she learned. She came home. What did you discover? Does it matter? He asked, shrugging. Truth is elastic. Responsibility isn't. When I got home, I texted a number I hadn't used in years. Thomas Newen, the nice boy. Lila had dated in grad school, the one Philip had called orthopedically suitable, with a laugh that made Lila flinch. It took him a day to answer. When he did, his message was 3 sentences long. I kept the emails. I kept the screenshots. I always wondered if she knew. Thomas sent a folder that made my stomach turn, doctored screenshots of private messages he never sent, forwarded to Lila from an anonymous email that used a domain registered by one of Philip's Shell LLCs, an IP lookup I could have done in the time it takes to microwave dinner. A timeline that showed how quickly Lila had been convinced that doubt was safety. She broke the engagement the week after a dinner at her parents' house where the conversation had been concerned. I printed everything and put it with the thumb drive and the lab report and the pharmacy records. Then I printed copies. Show me, Lila said when I told her I had something that would hurt. I did. She sat on the floor in our hallway with the papers in her lap and cried in the way people cry when grief arrives dressed like clarity. I thought I left, she said, voice raw. I didn't leave. I was sent. We're leaving now, I said. Together. She nodded. Then she wiped her eyes and said, We tell them as a family, or we tell the world alone. We did not ask permission to record the conversation that evening when we walked into Veronica's living room with Logan and Sabrina. I set my phone on the mantel and said, I want to document our attempt at reconciliation. Veronica said, Absolutely not. And I said, Then know that I will remember everything you say better than you will. For 2 hours, we were historians in a house that believed itself immune to history. I played the clips. Lila told Thomas's story. Sabrina told her own. Logan said, Mom, the way a 5-year-old says it when a car door slams and the dark is bigger than yesterday. Philip tried to negotiate. Veronica tried to pray aloud. Lila stood and did the thing I married her for. She drew a line where water wanted to run. No more dinners for a while, she said. No more calls that start with, I'm worried. No more surprise visits to my office to bring lunch and gauge my calendar. If you want a relationship with us, you have to have it with who we are. I handed Philip a thumb drive with our evidence on it. I'm not going to send this to your board or your pastor, I said. I won't hurt Lila to hurt you. But if you try to hurt us again, you will be the one explaining to a room full of people who use the word integrity the way you use the word impression, while your wife keeps a dropper next to Julia Child. For the first time since I met him, Philip looked like a man who understood he could lose. Not money, not face, his children. The part of him that believed the world was a ledger faltered when it had to add loss in a column that didn't pay dividends. He sat down. Veronica's eyes got bright and dangerous and then very tired. No apology came. I had not expected one. We left. Months are made of hours, and the hour after the hard thing always looks like a hallway. Lila and I filled ours with therapy and oatmeal and walks on the Battery where the wind decides whether to slap or soothe. Veronica and Philip did not call. Logan sent short texts with too many periods. Sabrina and I became the kind of close in-laws become when they choose each other on purpose. Then, over Thanksgiving, an invitation arrived in the mail on thick card, a fresh start, in gold script, dinner at 7. I showed Lila the envelope. "They don't change," she said. "No," I said, "but we did." We went. Veronica's smile had the edges sanded off. Philip asked me about a fentanyl training I'd given at the station and did not, for once, say the word risk, like reckless. After dessert, Philip invited me into his study. He poured 2 scotches and kept his hands flat on the desk. "Client relations is still open," he said. "You'd be good at it. Real hours, real pay, real advancement." "My hours are real," I said. "My pay puts gas in the rigs. My advancement is that a rookie goes home believing he can do this job without breaking. I'm not for sale." He nodded like he'd rehearsed being magnanimous. "This is an olive branch." "This is a leash," I said, setting my glass down without drinking. "I'm not your dog." His mouth did a thing men's mouths do when someone refuses to be traded. "Everyone has a price," he said. "I do," I said. "It looks like Lila smiling when I walk in the door. You can't pay it." We rejoined the table. Veronica was showing Lila a photo album of birthday cakes. Lila closed it gently and stood. "We have news," she said, and both of her parents sat up like schoolchildren. "We're having a baby." Veronica cried the way people cry when the future they planned for someone else arrives with its own suitcase. Philip shook my hand and said congratulations and then leaned in close enough for only me to hear. "Don't make me regret this," he said. "Don't make me introduce your grandchild to a version of you that can't keep his hands off other people's choices," I said back. 3 weeks later, a certified letter showed up with a deed attached. The little brick bungalow we'd been renting, signed over to Lila for love and affection, from a holding company Philip owned. There was also a trust document for a college fund. No note, no conditions. I showed Lila on the porch steps. She sat beside me and exhaled. "This isn't an apology," she said. "No," I said. "It's a translation. It says, we can't say sorry, so we will do something we understand." When Eliza was born in July, I counted her fingers and cried like I had never seen 10 before. Veronica and Philip came to the hospital in the clumsy way grandparents come when they're used to grandstanding. Veronica stood at the foot of the bed and didn't touch anything until Lila handed her the baby. She cried again, the soft kind. Philip took a picture on a phone he didn't know how to use and left after 7 minutes, as if he'd budgeted humility for 15 and couldn't risk overtime. We found a rhythm that did not look like reconciliation so much as détente. They sent gifts with receipts. We attended a Sunday dinner once every 6 weeks and left after 90 minutes, when Veronica started to say, "In our family we—" Lila put a hand up like a traffic cop and finished the sentence, "Love our granddaughter by respecting her parents." Veronica learned the new line. Philip stopped sending job postings. In the fall, my captain asked me to build a community paramedicine program for our county. Fewer ER transports, more home visits for frequent callers, more dignity for the people whose crises are long and boring and hungry. I said yes so fast I tasted copper. The grant paid for 3 medics, a social worker, and a nurse practitioner 2 days a week. We spent mornings in trailers with soft floors and afternoons in libraries teaching kids how to use tourniquets. We kept logs like prayer books. My rookies learned what an ally looks like when it carries a clipboard. At the kickoff press conference, the county PR person asked for a photographer. I said I knew someone cheap and good. Me. The photos ended up in 3 local papers. A month later, a slick annual report from Huxley Capital landed in our mailbox with my name on a little card. Inside, spread across matte pages, were photographs that looked exactly like the ones I had taken. Public parks at sunrise, dock workers in silhouettes, a portrait of a city employee squinting into light like hope. At the back, in small print, it said, "Images courtesy of Ethan Cole." No check arrived. I didn't expect one. I didn't call to say thank you. It felt like a white... When Eliza turned 1, we threw a picnic under an oak that has seen more hurricanes than county administrators. Veronica and Philip came with a monogrammed blanket and a gift that made no sound when you rattled it. They sat on the edge of the group and did not offer advice about naps. Logan held his daughter and his nephew and his phone like all three might break. Sabrina laughed with my mother about hospital socks. Lila cut cake and looked at me over Eliza's head the way she did at the farmer's market when the tomatoes were $1.99 a pound, and our future was a question we were brave enough to ask. On the drive home, Lila said, "Do you think they've changed?" "No," I said, "but I think we have. We learned how to stay married in a house built for something else." That winter, Veronica called and asked if we would consider coming to the foundation gala. "No cameras," she said quickly, "just if you wanted to be seen." "We don't," Lila said gently. Veronica didn't argue. In the spring, she invited us to dinner on a Tuesday and we said no, and she didn't ask why. In the summer, the city flooded, and one of Lila's culverts held and our kitchen table turned into a command center with maps and granola bars and Eliza's crayons. Philip texted me a photo from a street his firm owned 2 buildings on and wrote, "Impressive work." I sent back a picture of our rookies knee-deep in water hauling a woman with a walker to dry ground. We did not add hearts. It took a long time for me to stop replaying the dropper. Some nights, I'd wake up with the taste of Zolpidem in a glass I never drank. Lila would roll over and put her hand in the middle of my chest until my breathing believed my body again. We made a list on the fridge of the things we were allowed to say we survived: a flood, a bad call, an inheritance we refused to cash, a marriage class taught by people who failed it. Last month, I taught a class to new medics called Boundaries You Can Live With. I told them that the job will take anything you do not say no to, and so will people who confuse love with control. I said that you can be kind and still lock your door. I said that if someone tries to make you smaller, you must measure yourself against the people who stand you back up, not the ones who cut you down and call it tailoring. After class, a kid with a tattoo of a wren on his forearm waited until the room emptied and said, "How do you forgive somebody who would drug you to teach you a lesson?" "You don't," I said. "You forgive yourself for sitting at tables where the lesson was possible. Then you take your own chair home." Sometimes revenge is an act with a target. Sometimes it's a refusal with an audience. I didn't ruin Veronica and Philip. I didn't mail thumb drives to country clubs or staple lab reports to church bulletin boards. I didn't need to. The story told itself when we stopped reading from their script. Last week, we took Eliza to the beach at dawn, the way you do in late summer to beat the heat and the tourists. Lila carried coffee and I carried a bucket, and Eliza carried nothing and everything. A new word for sand, a squeal for a gull, the certainty that the ocean will play back if you stomp at it with both feet. We drew our names in the smooth part near the foam. The tide erased them and then didn't. The sun came up on schedule. On the walk back to the car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Philip. "Saw the piece in the paper about your program. Good work. No punctuation, no strings." I put the phone in my pocket and lifted Eliza onto my shoulders. Lila slid her hand into my back pocket like she always does when she wants me to know she's there, and the sidewalk is uneven. We drove home with wet towels and a child singing nonsense in the third person. At a red light, Lila looked over at me and said, "Do you realize we did it?" "Did what?" "Built the life they said we couldn't," she said. "Without them, without permission." At home, I made pancakes, and Eliza ate 2 and wore a third. We napped in a heap. In the afternoon, I took the thumb drive out of the fire safe where we keep passports and photographs of our grandparents and slid it into a drawer that holds rubber bands and a tape measure and nothing that can break us. Then I went to the bedroom, lay down beside my wife, and let the house hum around us like a heart we had built with our own hands. If you're asking what the moral is, it isn't dramatic. It's not a headline. It's this: some people will try to pour something into your glass and call it love. Learn what love tastes like. Learn to smell it from the kitchen. Learn to switch glasses if you have to, and then learn to stop drinking anything that comes with conditions. And if you can, when the storm passes and the baby sleeps and your partner smiles at you from under a ceiling you paid for with hours that were hard and honest, remember what revenge really looks like. Not a throat cleared in a country club, not a deed in the mail. A quiet morning, a promise kept, a glass of water you poured yourself.